Well, my name is Regunberg. As he said, I'm a state representative from up in Providence, and I am very proud and excited to join you today. Ever since I've been active in the movement for racial justice and economic justice and social justice, I've always noticed consistently that at every picket for workers, every climate rally, every lobby day for reproductive justice, the UUs always show up, they're always there, they're always pitching in, and so I'm proud to pitch in with you today. I know that you come together like this every year to discuss the actions you plan to take to further your ideals, and thank God that you do, because I believe that this step of taking real action is more important this year than maybe it has ever been before in our country's history. And I know that's a bit of an explosive claim. You know, we've certainly seen bad times before in this country: slavery, Native American genocide, Jim Crow, the Great Depression. We've certainly always had wickedness, and we've always had injustice, and we've had division, right? I mean, the Civil War, that was the bloodiest conflict in our nation's history. The difference, though, is that during that moment, the risk to the Republic was outside the White House, and we had someone inside the White House who knew what needed to be done. Today, in a moment when we face existential threats like we've never seen before, climate change, inequality, threats that call for bolder and more ambitious action than ever, the risk to the Republic is sitting right inside the White House. And I really believe that he is capable of doing worse than any of us can think. Even the most panicked of us, I think he is capable of doing worse. I think that we could take the worst thing that we could imagine that could come out of this administration, and President Trump and his team are capable of worse. Now, I say that not to be all doom and gloom, but simply to articulate the stakes of this moment and the stakes of the decision, our decision as to what we choose to do in response. I didn't say that we're all doomed. I said that this step of taking action is more important now than ever, because as dangerous as Trump is, I really also believe that he is eminently beatable. He may be capable of worse than we can imagine, but we are also more capable of blocking his agenda than I think he can imagine. And it all comes down to what we choose to do, the collective action we take, the movement that we build to resist the Trump agenda, and ultimately to take back our power, right? And I would argue that this movement right now needs to do two things, which is hard. It's never easy to multitask, but I think it's really, really necessary in this time, because the work before us requires that we both stand strong to defend our values, defend the communities that are most dear to us, and also that we go on the offense and that we present our alternative vision of our world and our country and our state, and effectively make the case to every American, to all the folks who are going to vote in 2018 and 2020, that this vision, that our vision, is the better one for them and for their families and for their future. I think that's something that the folks who come together in this congregation are good at, is envisioning that alternative future, right? And to accomplish that second piece, there's a couple basic truths that folks on our side need to accept and embrace. The first is that our battle is with Donald Trump. It's not with all of Donald Trump's voters, right? On that front, I think it's really important that we differentiate between supporters and voters, Trump supporters and Trump voters. There are some people out there who are through and through there for Donald Trump. They're there for the racism, they're there for the xenophobia, they love every piece of his political program, and those people are not going to come to our side. We shouldn't try to win them over. It's not going to happen, and it probably shouldn't happen. But then there are a ton of members of that pool of 60 million Americans who voted for Donald Trump, who are not there necessarily because they love him. They're there because they are feeling intense economic anxiety. They've seen their wages stagnate, They've seen their factories close down. They've seen and experienced a loss of security and a loss of maybe privileges that they've had. And through that, they have lost faith and trust in institutions. They've lost trust in the broken promises that they've experienced from politicians. And then they hear this guy who makes no bones about it. He's speaking directly to them. And he says, I'm going to make America great again. And they buy it. Certainly they buy it enough to give it a shot and vote. So those folks, and we need to keep, in all the organizing we do, we need to remember those folks are not the enemy. In a house of worship, it's weird to use the word enemy. I do think Donald Trump is the enemy. I can't stress that hard enough. Donald Trump, I believe, is the enemy. But Trump's voters are not. And in fact, they are some of the people that we need to win back on our side if we're ever going to get power back. And in order to present the vision that can win those folks back, I also think we need to take an honest look at ourselves. For me as a Democrat, I'm an elected Democrat, I'm in this party, that means forcing our party to admit that we have just as much culpability in this disaster as anyone else. It was both of our parties that came together on those trade deals that did a whole lot to leave towns in Ohio and Pennsylvania and Michigan and Wisconsin that voted for Trump the rusted out shells that they are. It was Newt Gingrich and Bill Clinton, and they both said we'd come back around and offer the retraining and the supports for the folks who ended up on the losing end of those deals, and they both failed to do that. It was both of our parties that said, you know what, let's deregulate the banks. That's a good idea, right? What can go wrong? Well, it turns out everything can go wrong with that, and everything did go wrong with that. And in the aftermath of that, it was both of our parties that decided to bail out Wall Street and not bail out Main Street, not do anything for the homeowners that were underwater. And then it was both of our parties that refused to prosecute a single one of the Wall Street bankers that played a part in tearing down the world economy. I was at a conference not too long ago, and former Attorney General Eric Holder was there. And Eric Holder did some good things when it comes to civil rights while he was Attorney General. But he was giving this speech about Donald Trump, and it was firing people up, and he had this standing ovation afterwards. And I clapped, but I also couldn't help thinking, Eric Holder, if you had prosecuted a single one of the high-profile Wall Street criminals who helped tear down our world economy, I think there's an argument to be made that Donald Trump wouldn't be president right now. And he didn't do that, and he left office and he joined a giant law firm that represents a lot of Wall Street bankers, and he's been making a whole lot of money ever since. And we huff and puff when that happened under George W. Bush, and it's just as unacceptable when it happened under Obama. So it's both of our parties here. Both of our parties have been war on drug parties, right? Have been the tough on crime parties, the tearing apart communities of color through incarceration parties. And then we wonder why black people living in cities in Michigan didn't turn out in high numbers for Democrats. So I could go on like that for a while, but I think you all get the point. We need a course correction, not just because it's the right thing to do, but because it is the only path we have out of this political wilderness that we're in right now. People voted for Donald Trump because they trusted he was going to fight for them. They got hoodwinked. For sure, it was a con job, and he's doing everything he can to make that pretty clear right now. But it is on us to give them the alternative, to show that Trump is fighting for Trump and his millionaire buddies and no one else, and that there is another way, a way that values their fears and anxieties, but that instead of punching down at the folks who have nothing to do with those fundamental root causes, at immigrants and people of color and LGBTQ people, etc., that actually focuses the energy up at the root causes of the problems we face in this country. That's what we have to do, and to be successful both on that front and on the defensive front that we're going to talk a lot about, I think, today, we need to build our movement at every level. We need to contribute to it at the national level, and I actually think Rhode Island has been punching above its weight on that front so far as holding our Democrats to a higher standard in our federal delegation, saying the rules have changed, and you have to understand now that the rules have changed, and what might have flown before doesn't. We need you to be committed in your tenacity in fighting back against this agenda. And we've had an impact in the National Democratic Party conversation from what we've done here in Rhode Island, and also building that movement at the state and local level. And we're actually in a really exciting position in Rhode Island, because I think that there is very little that we can't do here at the state level as far as effectively defending our values and our communities from the agenda that we're seeing out of DC. It is possible. We can, I see immigration up there, we can defend our immigrant neighbors. We can do a whole lot on that front. There's legislation in the State House right now that can accomplish a whole lot there. We can protect reproductive justice. We can guarantee a woman's right to choose. We've got legislation in the General Assembly right now to do just that. We can be leaders in taking hold of our clean energy future and bringing renewable energies to scale and say no more fossil fuels in Rhode Island. We can do all of that without any help from Washington, D.C. We can go on the offense when it comes to working families, saying that every hardworking Rhode Islander should be able to earn a living wage, should be able to have some basic middle-class securities, be able to take a day off work to care for their health, or their kids' health, or an aging parent's health. That legislation is up at the State House right now. We know what we need to do. It's not a technical question. We've got the policies. It is a political question of building the political will to actually get these things over the finish line. And that's another advantage we have in Rhode Island. We are a blue state, right? Our voters, we know overwhelmingly actually support that agenda. Majority, in some cases the vast majority of Rhode Islanders, they want to see a woman's right to choose protected. Even most Catholics in our state want to see a woman's right to choose protected. They want to see a fair shot for working families. They want to see, they support clean energy. So it's not an issue of the popularity of these things. It is an issue, and anyone who's had experience in Rhode Island politics knows this, it is an issue of actually getting our Democratic Party, which controls the State House right now, to follow through on the values that our Democratic Party is supposed to. Again, we all know that there are Democrats who don't necessarily stand for democratic values, who block pieces of these agenda that we need to protect against Trump's agenda. But I think it's really important that we stop using that as a justification for not winning. It is an analysis, it's an accurate analysis, right? That is a reality, but we can't use it as an excuse or as a crutch for why we're not moving our agenda, because we can win, we can still win. And in order to do that, we also know what we have to do. There's two things we need to focus on. First is political organizing and advocacy, and that's what you're going to be talking about today. As an example, we talked about marriage equality. I'm sure a lot of people here were heavily involved in that campaign. The campaign for marriage equality got that legislation passed through the Rhode Island State Senate despite a clear majority of rank-and-file senators and pretty much all of the Senate legislative leadership being ideologically opposed to that policy. They didn't support it, but you know what? They were also politicians. And so politicians respond to public pressure. They respond to their constituents. They respond to the media. They respond to organizing. And so that, many of you in this room were able to come together and win that fight. It's the same exact thing on any of these other issues. Even if we don't have leadership that ideologically agrees, or sometimes even a clear majority, we can build the movement and the campaigns to get them over the finish line. And that's why I'm so excited that you guys are joining in these fights, as you have been year after year. We've got the paths and the tools in front of us to make the changes we want to see. And so we need to be in this fight, and we need to not only fight, but we need to win, right? It is our responsibility not just to fight, but to actually win. It's our responsibility to be strategic, to be effective, to build the coalitions necessary to actually get these things over the finish line, because now more than ever, people's lives really hang in the balance. So I'm so excited to be here to join this conversation, to work with all of you as we continue not just to fight, but actually to move this agenda and win for the sake of all of our neighbors and colleagues in Rhode Island. So thank you so much.